The Galactic Council chamber was vast beyond imagining. It stretched upward like a cathedral built for giants, with seats carved into the walls in rising tiers that seemed to reach toward the stars themselves. Thousands of beings filled those seats, representatives from species that had been traveling between stars when humanity still lived in caves. Their eyes, in every shape and color imaginable, all turned toward the center of the chamber where a single platform waited. Danny stood at the entrance and felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. He was wearing simple clothes, not the formal robes that the Velorai had offered him. He had refused them. If he was going to speak for humanity, he would do it as himself, not as some dressed-up version that pretended to be something he was not. Vareth walked beside him, and Kira held his hand. The young girl had insisted on coming, refusing to let Danny face this moment alone. Her father had eventually agreed. Though Danny could see the worry in the High Chancellor's ancient eyes, they walked together toward the platform, and with each step, the murmuring of the crowd grew louder. Danny could feel the weight of their attention, their curiosity, their judgment. Some looked at him with interest. Some looked at him with contempt. The Kovani delegation glared at him with undisguised hatred. Their scaled faces twisted with anger. The council speaker, a being made of living crystal who had presided over these gatherings for centuries, called the session to order. The chamber fell silent, and Danny felt his heart pounding in his chest. The Kovani representative spoke first. He was a massive creature covered in dark scales, with teeth like daggers and eyes like pools of molten gold. He demanded that Danny be handed over to the Kovani Empire to face justice for killing their assassins. He called Danny a criminal, a murderer, a symbol of everything wrong with the younger species who polluted the galaxy with their presence. He spoke of human violence and human aggression. He claimed that humans were a threat to galactic peace, a species that would spread across the stars like a plague if not contained. He said that the Velorai had made a terrible mistake by saving Danny, by binding him to their essence and making him more than human. They had created a monster, and the monster needed to be destroyed. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species sided with the Kovani, believing that humans were indeed too dangerous to be trusted. Others defended humanity, pointing out that the Kovani had started this conflict by trying to murder a child. The debate raged back and forth, accusations flying from every direction. Through it all, Danny stood silently on the platform. He listened to beings who had never met a human speak about what humans were. He heard his entire species judged based on fear and ignorance. And slowly, something began to build inside him. Not anger exactly, but a quiet determination. A need to speak his truth. The speaker finally called for order and turned to Danny. It was time for the human to address the council. Danny stepped forward and looked out at the thousands of faces watching him. He took a deep breath and began to speak. He said that he was not a diplomat or a warrior or anyone important. He was just a cargo handler from a small planet that most of the council had probably never heard of. He had come to work on a space station because he needed money to help his family. That was all. He had no grand ambitions, no secret plans, no desire to be a hero or a symbol, but he had seen a little girl standing near a bomb. He had seen fear in her eyes and known that she was going to die if someone did not act. So he acted. He did not think about politics or species or ancient grudges. He just saw a child who needed help. He said that this was what humans did. They were emotional and sometimes foolish. They acted on instinct instead of careful planning. They loved deeply and fought fiercely and sometimes threw themselves into danger without any logical reason. These qualities made them weak by some measures. But these same qualities made them strong in ways that older species did not understand. He looked directly at the Kovani delegation as he continued. He said that the Kovani had sent assassins to kill him, and he had defended himself. He was not proud of the violence, but he was not ashamed of it either. Humans did not give up. They did not surrender to bullies who tried to frighten them into submission. If the Kovani wanted to keep sending assassins, Danny would keep fighting them. Not because he wanted war, but because he refused to let fear control his life. He turned to address the entire council. He said that humanity was young. They made mistakes. They had much to learn from older species. But they also had something to offer, something that perhaps the galaxy had forgotten over the millennia. They had passion. They had hope. They had the ability to love strangers enough to die for them. He said that he did not know what would happen after today. Maybe the council would hand him over to the Kovani. Maybe they would punish humanity for being too emotional, too unpredictable, too human. But whatever they decided, he wanted them to know one thing. He was not special. There were billions of humans back on Earth, and most of them would have done the same thing he did. If they had seen that little girl standing near that bomb, they would have run toward her, not away. That was who humans were. That was what they were made of. The chamber fell silent when Danny finished speaking. No one seemed to know how to respond. Then, slowly, a sound began to rise from the gallery. It started with a single being clapping their hands together, then spread to others and others still. Within moments, half the council was applauding, while the other half sat in stunned silence. The Kovani representative demanded to speak again, but the speaker denied his request. The council had heard enough. It was time to vote. The vote was closer than Danny had hoped, but more favorable than he had feared. The majority of species sided with humanity and the Valori. The Kovani were censured for their assassination attempts and warned against further aggression. Danny would not be handed over. Humanity would not be punished. When the results were announced, Kira squeezed Danny's hand so hard it almost hurt. Vorath placed a hand on his shoulder, and for just a moment, the ancient High Chancellor looked almost emotional. Later that day, Vorath made Danny an offer. He could return to Earth if he wished, go back to his old life and his family. But there was another option. The Valori wanted him to serve as a liaison between their species and humanity. His unique position, bound to both peoples through the essence binding, made him the perfect bridge between two worlds. Danny thought about the offer for a long time. He missed his family. He missed Earth. He missed the simple life he had lived before all of this began. But he also understood that he could do more good by staying. He could help humanity take its place among the stars. He could build bridges between species and maybe prevent future conflicts. He accepted the position. Years later, historians would write about that day in the council chamber. They would call it the moment when humanity announced itself to the galaxy, not through military power or technological achievement, but through the simple courage of an ordinary man. Danny Cole became a legend, though he never felt comfortable with that title. He was just doing what felt right, the same thing he had always done. And sometimes, when the work grew hard and the politics grew frustrating, he would remember why he was there. He would remember a scared little girl with silver eyes and a bomb that was about to steal her future. He would remember the choice he had made without thinking, the choice that had changed everything. Kira grew up to become one of the greatest leaders the Valori had ever known. She never forgot the human who had saved her life, and she spent her career fighting for closer relations between her people and humanity. When she spoke about Danny in her speeches, she always said the same thing. He taught us that sometimes the youngest species has the oldest wisdom. He taught us that logic is not always the highest virtue. He taught us that the willingness to sacrifice everything for a stranger is not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. And Danny, listening to those words, would smile and shake his head. He had never wanted to be a symbol or a hero. He had just wanted to do the right thing. But maybe, he thought, that was exactly what made someone a hero in the first place. 3 weeks passed on the Volari homeworld, and Danny slowly began to understand what he had become. His body was different now in ways that surprised him every day. He could run faster than before, his legs carrying him across distances that would have exhausted him in his old life. His eyes could see things that had once been invisible, energy fields and life forces that flowed through everything around him. His ears could hear whispers from rooms away, and his mind could process information faster than he had ever thought possible. But the changes were not always pleasant. At night, Danny dreamed of things that did not belong to him. He saw ancient wars fought on worlds he had never visited. He felt emotions that were not his own, memories of loss and love and triumph that belonged to Volari, who had lived and died centuries ago. The essence binding had connected him to their people in ways that no one fully understood. He was still human, but he carried pieces of something older inside him. The Volari physicians monitored him constantly, taking readings and asking questions about every new sensation he experienced. They were learning as much from him as he was learning about himself. Danny became a subject of study, a living experiment that could teach them about the limits of their own ancient science. He did not mind the attention. He understood that he was something new, something that had never existed before. If his experience could help them understand more about the universe, then at least some good would come from all of this. But the peaceful days on Velaris could not last forever. News from the wider galaxy grew darker with each passing day. The Corvani Empire was angry, more angry than anyone had expected. Their assassination attempt had failed, and worse, it had turned a simple human cargo handler into a hero. Stories about Danny spread across civilized space. Species that had never thought twice about humanity were now talking about them. And the Corvani could not stand it. High Chancellor Varath called Danny to his chambers one evening with urgent news. Intelligence reports indicated that the Corvani had dispatched assassins to eliminate Danny, not because he was a threat to their military power, but because killing him would humiliate both the Volari and humanity. It would prove that the human hero was just as fragile and worthless as they had always believed. Danny listened to the news with a calm that surprised even himself. A few months ago, he would have been terrified at the idea of alien assassins hunting him. But something had changed inside him, something beyond just his physical abilities. He had faced death once and survived. He had already given his life to save a child. What more could the Corvani take from him? Varath offered to hide him somewhere safe, a protected world where the assassins could never reach him. Danny refused. Running and hiding was not his way. If the Corvani wanted him dead, they would have to come and try. He would not spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. The attacks began 3 days later. The first assassin came at night, slipping into Danny's quarters with weapons designed to kill silently and efficiently. But Danny's new senses detected the intruder before he could strike. He felt the disturbance in the energy fields around him, heard the faint whisper of movement that would have been invisible to his old human ears. When the assassin lunged at him, Danny was already moving. They fought in the darkness of his room. The assassin using techniques perfected over centuries of warfare. Danny relying on instincts he did not fully understand. His body moved in ways that surprised him, dodging attacks that should have been too fast to avoid, striking back with strength he had never possessed before. The fight was brutal and desperate, and when it ended, Danny stood over the fallen Corvani with blood on his hands and shock in his heart. He had won. Somehow, against an enemy who should have been far superior, he had survived. The Volari guards arrived moments later, drawn by the noise of combat. They found Danny standing in the middle of his destroyed room, breathing heavily, alive when all logic said he should be dead. Word spread quickly through the palace and beyond. The human had fought a Corvani assassin and won. 2 more attempts followed in the next week. Each time, Danny survived through a combination of his enhanced abilities and something else, something the Velarai could not explain. He refused to give up. He refused to die. Even when he was injured, even when the odds were impossible, he kept fighting with a stubbornness that defied all reason. The Corvani captured one of their surviving assassins and questioned him about the failed missions. The assassin's report troubled them deeply. He said that killing the human should have been easy. Danny had no formal combat training. His enhanced abilities were significant, but not extraordinary by Corvani standards. Yet somehow, the human would not stay down. Every time they thought they had him, he found a way to continue fighting. Every time they pushed him to the edge of defeat, he pushed back harder. It was as if the human simply refused to accept the possibility of losing. The assassin said something else that troubled the Corvani commanders. He said that fighting the human was different from fighting other species. Other beings, when faced with certain death, would make logical decisions. They would surrender or flee or accept their fate. But this human acted like death was simply not an option he was willing to consider. He fought with his whole being, holding nothing back, as if losing was literally unthinkable. This report caused serious debate within the Corvani leadership. They had always dismissed humans as weak, emotional creatures who would crumble under real pressure. But this human had shattered that assumption. If one ordinary human could resist their best assassins through sheer determination, what might happen if they pushed humanity too far? Meanwhile, Danny's story continued to spread across the galaxy. The tale of the cargo handler who saved an alien princess had evolved into something larger. Now it was the tale of the human who could not be killed, who fought off assassins with nothing but courage and stubbornness. Some versions of the story were exaggerated, claiming Danny had killed dozens of Corvani or that he possessed secret human powers. But the core truth remained: a regular human had done extraordinary things. On Earth, people who had never heard of Danny Cole now spoke his name with pride. Humanity had been a minor player in galactic politics for centuries, often ignored or looked down upon by older species. But Danny had given them something to believe in. He had shown that humans were not just primitive newcomers. They were something special. The Galactic Council announced an emergency summit to address the escalating tensions between the Corvani Empire and the Velarai Human Alliance. Representatives from dozens of species would gather to decide the fate of the galaxy. And at the center of it all, whether he liked it or not, was Danny Cole. Varth summoned Danny to prepare him for the summit. He explained that Danny would need to speak before the council, to represent not just himself, but all of humanity. The fate of his species might depend on what he said. Danny felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. He was not a diplomat or a politician. He was just a cargo handler who had done what felt right. But the universe did not care about what he wanted to be. It only cared about who he was. He told Vorath that he would attend the summit. He would speak for humanity. And he would tell the truth, the same simple truth he had told from the beginning. Whatever happened after that was out of his control. Kira visited him that night, the last night before they left for the summit. She asked if he was ready. Danny smiled and shook his head. No, he said. He was not ready at all. But that had never stopped him before. High Chancellor Vorath stood before Danny like a statue carved from moonlight. He was ancient, far older than any human could ever become, and his silver eyes held centuries of wisdom and power. He did not speak for a long moment. He simply looked at Danny, studying him the way a scientist might study a strange new specimen. Danny met his gaze without looking away. He did not know the proper way to greet the leader of an alien civilization. He did not know if he should bow or kneel or speak first. So he simply sat on his bed and waited, letting the silence stretch between them. Finally, Vareth spoke. His voice was deep and musical. carrying authority that seemed to fill the entire room. He said that he had ruled the Velorai people for over 400 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species evolve and others go extinct. He had witnessed more history than any human could imagine. And in all those centuries, he had never understood humans. He said that humans were young, barely children by galactic standards. They had only been traveling between stars for a few hundred years. Their technology was crude compared to older species. Their lifespans were heartbreakingly short. They fought among themselves constantly and seemed incapable of true unity. By all logical measures, humans should have been ignored, dismissed as another primitive species that would fade into obscurity. But they did not fade. They grew. They spread. They adapted to environments that should have killed them. They survived disasters that should have destroyed them. And now one of them had thrown himself into certain death to save a child. He did not know. Vara said he had asked his advisors to explain Danny's actions. They could not. They had analyzed every possibility, every potential motive. Perhaps the human had known who Kira was and hoped for a reward. Perhaps he had been manipulated by someone else. Perhaps there was some genetic programming that drove humans to sacrifice themselves. None of these explanations satisfied Vorath. He had come here himself to find the truth. He wanted to hear from Danny's own mouth why he had done what he did. Danny took a deep breath. He had already answered this question for Kira, but he sensed that Vorath needed more than a simple answer. This was a being who had spent centuries thinking in terms of politics and strategy and long-term consequences. He needed to understand the human mind. Danny told him that there was no hidden reason. There was no calculation. He said that when he saw Kira standing near that bomb, his body moved on its own. His heart made the decision before his brain could interfere. He did not think about rewards or consequences or whether it made logical sense. He just saw a child in danger and knew he had to protect her. He said that this was how humans were built. They felt things deeply and powerfully. They loved their families, their friends, and sometimes even strangers they had never met. When those feelings were strong enough, humans would do anything, even die, to protect the people they cared about. It was not logical. It was not logical. It was not strategic. It was simply human. Vorath listened in silence. When Danny finished speaking, the High Chancellor closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, there was something different in his expression. Not understanding exactly, but perhaps the beginning of respect. He told Danny that his actions had created a complicated situation. The bombing was not random. It was an assassination attempt carried out by agents of the Corvani Empire. The Corvani were a militaristic species who saw the Velorai as weak and humans as insects. They had tried to kill Kira to hurt Vorath, to destabilize the Velorai leadership and create an opportunity for war. They had failed because of Danny, and now the entire galaxy knew what had happened. News of the human cargo handler who had sacrificed himself for a Velorai child had spread to every corner of civilized space. Some species were inspired by the story. Others were confused. And the Corvani were furious. Vara said that Danny had become a symbol whether he wanted to be or not. His actions represented something larger than himself. They represented humanity, a young species that the galaxy had never taken seriously. By saving Kira, Danny had announced to the universe that humans were more than primitive newcomers. They were something unexpected, something that did not follow the rules that older species understood. This made Danny valuable. And it also made him dangerous. Vorath explained that according to Velorai tradition, Danny had earned something called a life debt. This was the highest honor their people could bestow. It meant that Danny had the right to ask for anything from the Velorai, and they would be obligated to grant it. Wealth, power, technology, even a planet of his own. Whatever he wanted, it would be his. Danny sat in stunned silence. He had never imagined anything like this. He was just a cargo handler from Earth. He had no ambitions of wealth or power. He had never even thought about what he might want if someone offered him anything in the galaxy. Vorath watched him carefully, waiting for his response. Danny could see that the High Chancellor was testing him. Whatever he asked for would tell Vorath everything he needed to know about human nature. Danny thought for a long time. He thought about his mother and his sister back on Earth. He thought about the life he had lived before, simple and unremarkable, but honest. He thought about what kind of person he wanted to be. Finally, he spoke. He said that he did not want wealth or power or planets. He said that he just wanted to go home. He wanted to see his family again and tell them he was okay. That was all he asked for. Vorath stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since entering the room, the ancient leader smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was there. He said that Danny would have his wish. But he also said that going home might not be as simple as Danny hoped. The galaxy had changed in the weeks since the bombing. Humanity had changed, and Danny himself had changed most of all. Vorath told him to rest and recover his strength. He said that tomorrow they would discuss what came next. Then he turned and walked toward the door, his robes flowing behind him like water. At the doorway, he paused and looked back at Danny one more time. He said that in 400 years of ruling his people, he had never met anyone quite like Danny Cole. He said that humans were strange and unpredictable and often foolish. But perhaps, he admitted, that was not always a weakness. Then he was gone, leaving Danny alone with his thoughts and the soft glow of the alien walls around him. Kira slipped back into the room a few minutes later. She had been waiting outside, listening to every word. She sat down next to Danny's bed and looked at him with those curious silver eyes. She asked him if he was scared. Danny thought about the question honestly. Yes, he said. He was scared. Everything was happening so fast, and he did not understand most of it. He was far from home, changed in ways he did not fully comprehend. And apparently at the center of some galactic political situation he had never asked to be part of. But being scared did not mean he had to stop moving forward. Humans had a saying, he told her. Feel the fear and do it anyway. It meant that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite the fear. Kira smiled at him, a real smile that made her young face light up with warmth. She said she was glad he had saved her. She said she wanted to learn more about humans and their strange ways of thinking. Danny smiled back at her. Whatever came next, at least he had made one friend in this strange new world. And somehow, that felt like enough. Danny opened his eyes and saw a light. It was soft and warm, not like the harsh lights of the space station. It moved gently across the ceiling like water reflecting sunlight. He blinked several times, trying to understand where he was. His body felt strange. Not painful, just different. Like he was wearing clothes that did not quite fit. He tried to sit up, and to his surprise, his body obeyed. There was no pain. There was no weakness. He looked down at his hands and saw that they were clean and whole. No burns. No cuts. No blood. He touched his chest where he remembered feeling something crack, but the skin was smooth and undamaged. The room around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls seemed to glow from within, shifting through soft shades of blue and white. The air smelled sweet, like flowers he could not name. The bed beneath him was soft but firm, and it seemed to adjust itself to his movements. This was not a human hospital. This was not any place he recognized. A door opened somewhere to his left, and Danny turned to see several figures entering the room. They were Velorai, tall and graceful with their pale blue skin and silver eyes. They wore white robes that flowed around them like water, and they looked at him with expressions he could not read. Some seemed curious. Others seemed almost afraid. One of them stepped forward and spoke. The words were strange at first, but then something clicked in Danny's mind, and he understood them perfectly. He did not know how. He had never learned their language. But somehow, he understood. The Valorai said that Danny had been sleeping for 23 days. She said that his injuries had been severe, the most severe they had ever seen a body survive. She said that by all logical measures, he should have died on that station floor. But he did not die. He was here. He was alive. And there were things he needed to know. Danny listened as she explained what had happened. The explosion had shattered his spine and damaged most of his internal organs. Human medicine could not have saved him. Even Velorai medicine should not have been enough. But the child he saved, the girl named Kira, she was not just any child. She was the daughter of High Chancellor Vareth, the leader of all the Velorai people. She was the most important child in their entire civilization. When the Velorai learned what Danny had done, they faced a choice. They could let him die and honor his memory. Or they could try something that had never been done before. Something ancient and forbidden. Something that went against everything they believed about keeping their species pure and separate from. Others that they chose to save him. The Velorai physician explained that they had used a process called the essence binding. It was a sacred ritual from their ancient past, used to save dying Velorai by sharing life energy between individuals. It had never been used on someone from another species. They did not know if it would work. They did not know what it would do to a human body. But Kira had begged them to try. She had cried and pleaded with her father until he agreed, and so they had bound Danny to their essence. They had woven Velorai life energy into his broken human body. They had rebuilt him from the inside out, using techniques older than human civilization itself. Danny looked at his hands again. They looked the same as before, but they felt different. He could sense things he had never sensed before. He could feel the energy flowing through the walls of the room. He could sense the life force of the Velorai standing before him. It was like suddenly being able to see a color that had always existed, but had been invisible to him until now. He asked what this meant. He asked what he had become. The physician hesitated before answering. She said that Danny was still human. His body was still made of human flesh and human blood. But there was something else inside him now, something Velorai woven into his very being. He would be stronger than before. His senses would be sharper. He would heal faster and live longer. But there would be other changes too, changes they could not predict. No one had ever done this to a human before. They would have to watch and wait to see what happened. Danny sat in silence for a long moment. He did not know how to feel about any of this. 3 weeks ago, he had been a simple cargo handler. He had no special skills, no important connections, no grand purpose in life. He had just been a man trying to earn money for his family. And now he was something else. Something new. Something that had never existed before. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked toward the door and saw her standing there. Kira, the girl he had saved. She looked healthy and unharmed, though there was still sadness in her silver eyes. She walked slowly into the room and stopped a few feet away from his bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kira asked him a question that Danny did not expect. She asked him why he did it. Why he ran toward danger instead of away from it. Why he threw his own body between her and the explosion when he did not know her. When he had nothing to gain from saving her. When logic said he should have run the other way. Danny thought about the question. He tried to find a complicated answer, something that would make sense to these ancient and wise aliens. But there was no complicated answer. There was only the truth. He told her that he saw a scared little girl. He saw danger coming toward her. and his body moved before his mind could think about it. He did not calculate the risks. He did not weigh the benefits. He just acted because that was what humans did. They protected children. They protected the innocent. Even when it cost them everything. Kira stared at him with those large silver eyes. She seemed to be searching for something in his face, some hidden meaning behind his simple words. The Velarai were a logical people. They made decisions based on careful analysis and long-term thinking. The idea of acting without thinking, of risking everything for a stranger, it did not make sense to them. But Kira was young. Her mind was still open to new ideas. And something about Danny's answer touched her in a way she did not fully understand. She walked closer to his bed and reached out her small hand. Danny took it gently in his own. Her skin was cool and smooth, and he could feel the energy pulsing through her, the same energy that now flowed through him. Kira said that her people had studied humans for centuries. They had watched them grow from primitive creatures to space travelers. They had always thought of humans as young and foolish, too emotional to be truly civilized. But no Velarai would have done what Danny did. No Velarai would have sacrificed themselves for a stranger's child without hesitation. She said that maybe humans were not foolish. Maybe they just understood something that older species had forgotten. Danny smiled at her, the first real smile since he had woken up. He did not have answers to the big questions. He did not know what his future held or what he had become. But in that moment, holding the hand of the little girl he had saved, he felt like maybe everything would be okay. The door opened again, and a new figure entered the room. This one was different from the others. He was older, taller, and his presence seemed to fill the entire space. His robes were deeper blue than the physician's, and there was a crown of light hovering above his head. This was someone important. This was someone powerful. Kira turned and bowed her head in respect. "Father," she said. High Chancellor Varath had come to meet the human who had saved his daughter. And Danny could tell from the look in those ancient silver eyes that this conversation would change everything. Danny Cole wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at the clock on the wall. His shift would end in 2 more hours, and then he could finally rest his tired body. Working as a cargo handler on Nexus 7 was not easy work. The space station was huge, and Danny spent most of his days moving heavy containers from one dock to another. But the pay was good, and he needed the money. His mother back on Earth was getting old, and his younger sister was still in school. Every credit he earned went straight to them. Nexus 7 was a strange place for a human to work. The station floated in deep space, far from Earth, and it served as a meeting point for dozens of alien species. Danny had seen creatures he could never have imagined before coming here. Some had 6 legs. Some had no legs at all. Some looked almost human, and others looked like nothing he could describe. They all came to Nexus 7 to trade goods, make deals, and talk politics. Danny did not care about any of that. He just moved boxes and minded his own business. The docking bay was loud today. Ships came and went every few minutes, and workers shouted instructions to each other in languages Danny did not understand. He pushed his cart toward the next pile of containers and started checking the labels. Most of this cargo was going to a planet called Velaris, home of the Velarai people. Danny had seen a few Velarai walking around the station. They were tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and large silver eyes. They moved like dancers, every step perfect and controlled. Danny thought they were beautiful in a strange way, but he had never spoken to one. The Velarai were important people. They did not talk to cargo handlers. Danny was about to lift the first container when something caught his eye. A small figure was walking alone near the edge of the docking bay. It was a child, a Velara girl who looked no older than 8 or 9 years old. She had the same blue skin and silver eyes as the adults, but there was fear on her face. She looked lost and confused, turning her head in every direction as if searching for someone. Danny frowned. What was a child doing here alone? The docking bay was dangerous. Ships landed and took off constantly, and heavy machinery moved all around. This was no place for a little girl. He looked around to see if anyone else had noticed her. The other workers were busy with their tasks. The aliens walking past did not seem to care. Danny hesitated for a moment. It was not his job to watch over lost children, but something about the fear in her eyes made him feel uneasy. He could not just ignore her. Danny took a step toward the girl, planning to ask if she needed help. But then he saw something else. There was a device attached to one of the cargo containers near where she stood. It was small and black, barely visible against the dark metal of the container. Danny had loaded thousands of containers in his time on this station. He knew what belonged on them and what did not. That device did not belong there. His heart started beating faster. He did not know what the device was, but every instinct in his body screamed that it was dangerous. The way it blinked with a faint red light. The way it was hidden from plain sight. Danny had heard stories about attacks on space stations. Bombs hidden in cargo. Assassinations disguised as accidents. He had never thought much about those stories until now. The device blinked faster. Danny did not think. He did not have time to think. His legs moved before his brain could catch up. He ran toward the girl as fast as he could, his boots pounding against the metal floor. She turned to look at him with wide, frightened eyes. She did not understand why this human was running at her. She took a step back, but Danny was faster. He reached her in seconds and threw his arms around her small body. He pulled her close to his chest and turned his back toward the container. His only thought was to protect her. His only thought was to keep her safe from whatever was about to happen. The explosion came a heartbeat later. The sound was louder than anything Danny had ever heard. It felt like the entire station shook beneath his feet. A wave of heat and force hit his back like a giant hand, and he felt himself flying through the air. He held the girl tighter, refusing to let go even as pain exploded through his body. They hit the ground hard, and Danny felt something crack inside him. His vision went white, then red, then started to fade to black. Alarms screamed all around them. People were shouting and running in every direction. Danny could feel the cold metal floor beneath his cheek. He could feel blood, warm and wet, spreading beneath him. His body hurt in ways he could not describe. Every breath felt like knives cutting into his lungs. But the girl was moving. He could feel her small body shifting in his arms. She was alive. She was crying and shaking, but she was alive. Danny tried to speak, but no words came out. He tried to move, but his body would not obey. The world was getting darker and quieter. The screaming voices faded into a distant hum. The pain started to feel far away, like it belonged to someone else. The girl pulled herself free from his arms and looked down at him. Her silver eyes were filled with tears. She was saying something in her language, words Danny could not understand. Her small hands touched his face, and he felt how cold his own skin had become. He wanted to tell her that everything would be okay. He wanted to tell her to find her parents. But he could not speak. He could not move. He could barely breathe. Danny looked up at the ceiling of the station, at the lights that flickered and sparked from the damage. He thought about his mother and his sister. He thought about how they would feel when they learned he was gone. He hoped someone would tell them that he died doing something good. He hoped they would be proud of him. The girl was still crying, still holding his face in her tiny hands. Danny wanted to smile at her, to let her know that he was not afraid. But the darkness was coming too fast. It wrapped around him like a cold blanket and pulled him down into silence. The last thing he heard was the girl screaming something in her language. The last thing he felt was her tears falling on his face. And then there was nothing at all. Workers rushed to the scene and found the human lying in a pool of blood with the Valerie child kneeling beside him. Medical teams arrived within minutes, but one look at Danny's injuries told them there was little hope. His spine was shattered. His organs were failing. By all normal measures, he was already dead. But the child refused to leave his side. She held onto his hand and screamed at anyone who tried to take her away. And when the Velera ship arrived to collect her, the people aboard saw what this human had done. They saw the scorch marks on his back where he had shielded her from the blast. They saw the way he had curled his body around hers to protect her. They took him aboard their ship along with the child. They did not know if they could save him. They did not even know if they should try. But the child would not stop crying, and she kept repeating the same words over and over in their language. He saved me. He saved me. He saved me. And so they flew toward Velaris, carrying a dying human and a traumatized child, with no idea that this moment would change everything for both their species.